Right on, recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. I'd like to welcome everybody to Thursday night Big Book Study Workshop of the Program of Recovery. You guys are in for a real treat tonight, so we better pray before we get going because I'm fired up, man. It's going to be good. What do we need for a good meeting? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We're on Bill's story. And we're going to do a little different spin on it tonight. I'm just going to go through it and hit some highlights. My sobriety date's April 8, 1989. It was my first Big Book Study workshop that I got introduced to after 11 years of in and out of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to get sober through the 12 and 12. I was in 4 12 and 12 studies, my last relapse, and I just finished 360 meetings in 90 days. Right, and then I got a 3-month chip, and an hour later I was drinking, just baffled. And what was even more baffling, that a big group of people couldn't kind of explain why I was relapsing in spite of all the efforts I was putting within our fellowship to try to get sober. So some guys got a hold of me, took me through the processes outlined by the first 100 men and women in their experience. I went through the same course of action they did, and I haven't looked back. So it seems to lead to longevity, sobriety, contentment, happiness, and a life far more dynamic than I could ever explain. So what I really have is the story of Alcoholics Anonymous, what's available here. And the title page talks about the story of how many thousands of men and women who have recovered from alcoholism. Kind of introduces us to the whole purpose of this thing. How many people like the idea that you could actually recover from an ailment that you're suffering from that could have a different change, right? Or how many people like the idea that you're going to deal with this for the rest of your life and this is as good as it gets? Nothing appealing about having a life sentence in Alcoholics Anonymous. So anyways, when we went through this, we kind of, we got the introduction of where we find the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's in the first portion. Preface says, because this book has become the basic text for our society to help such large number of alcoholic men and women to recover, there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left untouched. You hear a lot of people say, get in the middle. So this is actually the basis of Alcoholics Anonymous is the big book, right? So if your sobriety is based on the information that's outlined in here, what are the chances you're going to have a different experience than the one you came in here with, right? And so what you end up having is not really your own story anymore. You have the story of Alcoholics Anonymous and the collective experience of all those who went before us. But first we need to kind of determine whether I have this illness or not, right? Am I of the same type of people that are putting this thing together, right? Why is it that we became so very ill? Why is it that I can't change my life? Why is it that I keep on having the same experience over and over despite all my efforts, right? Despite everybody, how many people's had interventions from people around them? How many people's had to talk more than once? And how many people say, oh, I'm going, yeah. I'll never do that again and do something worse. Right, so, because we're not stupid, right? And so then we find out who put this basic text together. They talk forward to the first edition. They talked about we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. They're talking about two things here, right? In regards to the illness, we'll find out in regards to the illness of alcohol, consisting of both the body and mind, right? To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. What's the main purpose of this book? Yeah, precisely how they had recovered. And if you have the same experience, it'd be how we recovered, right? And so we're going to explain what we did. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps, right? And they'll go into that. So I need to kind of understand from their perspective, the collective experience, what the problem is, what the solution is, and what the course of action was they took to have this change. Yes, the story, right? So when we get to the doctor's opinion, it kind of sets this whole thing, I believe, is the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of people would think differently, but I think it was this doctor gave credibility to the miracle that was taking place through the application of these principles, right? So the first page here, in the doctor's opinion, he talks about his observations on a patient coming back to his facility upon the third time, acquiring certain ideas that he put into practice, right? And he watched this wholehearted miracle take place within his facility. Before his third visit, this person will find out his bill, what was he come to regard him as hopeless. So we'll see what classified him as hopeless. And he made a clear distinction here on this page. There's a difference between the human condition and alcoholism. They're two different things. If one wasn't present, how well do you think Bill would have done with his life? He would have done really good. He was earning a good potential, high potential, yes? But he had an illness. So what was dictating his life for him? What was alcoholism? What was dictating your life? What was making your decision, realizing it was making your decisions? So if you can't stay sober, would your life be a little unmanageable? Yeah. I'm trying not to make any jokes or slide remarks here, right? Just bear with me, right? I'm trying to it might be hard. Even Ray's surprised by that. So what they talk about here, he acquired certain, right? In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas, commencing a possible means of recovery. Right? So he watched this transformation happen within his facility, and it's pretty cool. As we went through this, what was the first symptom that they come to regard in this condition of the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body? So they're talking about the body. What was the first observation this doctor made with people of this type? The allergy, right? And so it kind of makes an abnormal reaction. So when these people put alcohol into their system, they seem to get thirstier. Normal people depletes their intake. We increase our intake. Anybody just thought they were really good drinkers? How many people thought those normal people had a problem? If you've ever had a conversation about those people, welcome to the club, right? Like, think about it. We're the only group of people that talk about normal drinkers like they got a problem. Those people. Right? They leave drinks behind. They do, they show up for work. They do things that they say they're going to do. They have a couple drinks, go home. They pay their rent with their own money. They don't borrow, right? Not stealing the kid's piggy bank, like on and on and on, right? So the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. Of course it does, right? It explains why we continue to drink when we have other obligations. Anybody remember that? Kind of your mind saying you need to do this and your body saying you need to have another drink? And then after a couple more drinks, your mind's not even talking to you anymore. All you're living the promises, right? You're in the moment. You have a new freedom, a new happiness. You don't regret nothing. And then it's last call, or you come 2 a.m. wondering, I think I got the right group, right? With a firm resolution not to do that again. Right? So it makes it clear that these types, the same type Bill that he come to regard as hopeless that went through his facility, he was able to help these other people with their human condition, but these certain types of people with this affliction seem to be on his scope of helping, right? And they continue to relapse in spite of everything that he's tried to help, right? And so they talk about here, men and women essentially like the effect by alcohol. Anybody need that explained? I like the effect. How many people like the consequences that go with drinking alcohol? You like the consequences? So what happens is, most of us, if we're honest, we think we have a consequence problem. We come in here, try to fix our lives, right? I got this problem, I got that problem, so I'm going to apply me to fix my life. So what's the first thing we think? I'm going to get a job, right? Then I'm going to get a partner. Oh, God's silent over here, right? I got a list of things I'm going to do to make me better. Anybody have that list? We all have that list, right? And it makes sense, right? I'm going to apply me to better my life, to improve my life. Well, if you're not afflicted with this illness, would you be able to do that with support, help, and meetings? But if you're afflicted with this illness, what are the chances of you being able to do that? Who's the only one that don't understand that? Is a person who's afflicted with it, because all these other people are trying to help them, coach them, throw bumper sticker slogans at them, read page 417, apply self to self, and you should get this, right? Meeting makers make it. But the only problem is people who are afflicted with this illness that the doctor talks about here, they talk about they're irritable, restless, and discontent. That's not alcoholism. That's the human condition. Why are these people irritable, restless, and discontent? Because they don't have a solution for the human condition. What used to be the solution for the human condition? Alcohol. Drinks they've seen others taking with impunity, right? What does impunity mean? Without consequence, right? And then this thing happens in their mind again where they're unable to see the truth in what they're about to do because their alcoholic life seems the only normal. It makes sense to have a drink. There's something else governing them. Anybody have that type of thing in here? In spite of everything that's happened to you, you find yourself, there you are again. How many people have that after you take the drink, your mind goes, hey, you're not supposed to be drinking. Now you're in trouble, right? Because if you can't stop yourself beforehand, and then after you take the drink, something else happens to you, then you're governed by, now you're talking to your illness. Beforehand, your illness is talking to you, and you don't realize that. So a lot of people give you the impression that after I take the first drink, well, that's a different problem, right? Then just don't do it would make sense. So when you hear say the only solution we have to offer for the physical factor is total abstinence. So people all say that's the solution, just don't drink, right? But there's a problem. Here he talks about these people seem to have this condition in the mind that he's going to get into later, that this thing, right, this seeing other taking a drink with impunity, them taking a drink again, which happens in the mind, the desire happens in the mind, which they'll expand on later, right? They go through triggering the phenomenon of craving. They go through a well-known stage of a spree. Anybody been through a spree here? Coming to with a firm resolution to change my life, not to do that again. I promise, I'm sorry, and over remorseful. Anybody good at over remorseful here? I mean, it's so good even you believe what you're saying, right? And why wouldn't you? Because you don't understand the illness, right? So you think that, and the doctor talks about this is repeated over and over and over. Roman numeral 24. Unless what happens? Unless they go through the first 9 steps? Unless they do step 1, unless it's very specific, unless they have an entire psychic change. Yes?
Yeah.
Next. Yeah, psychic change, spiritual awakening, they'll get here. They're very kind of specific, right? They talk about an entire psychic change, something sufficient enough to remove the problem that's causing them to do what they're doing, right? And so once this problem is removed, what are they left with? Alcoholism or the human component? They're left with the human component. So that's why we apply these principles now to the human component to create relief, guidance, and direction, a sense of ease and comfort through the application of these things. Does that kind of make sense? It doesn't make sense when you're kind of the observer on this side of it, but on the other side of it, when you're explaining it, once you've experienced it, the only guide we really have is these people say they used to be like me, but they don't look like me, they don't sound like me, they don't seem to, their life don't seem to represent what my life is looking like. Well, how did you get from here to here? Is the psychic change through a course of action, right? Unless this psychic change happens, what's their fate? They're going to drink again. So what does step 12 say there?
And had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps.
Yeah, right? The steps, right? Very specific. Did it say some of these steps? All of them. Because there's only one purpose we'll see for doing the steps is to have this experience. If we don't have this experience, we're doomed to drink again. Yes? Okay, so then he gives 2 examples. We've been through this already. Of people who are afflicted with his illness, who are beyond human aid, beyond his scope of helping. They both became sold on the ideas contained in this book. One person had grave emotional and mental disorders. So some of you should feel very hopeful about the possibility of recovering here. I know I did. Cheese and cracker on the same plate today. Things are all right. I'm on the right side of crazy and enjoying it. So he talked about, and one guy even kind of was totally skeptical about the whole idea that he's tried everything about this working, and he had to be reassured. Right, so he went through this, and the doctor witnessed the change in these 2 individuals. So what they were like, beyond human aid, afflicted with this illness of the body and mind, got sold on a course of action as the result of the whole course of action, not just part of it. Right, half measures availed us, Nothing. If you stop at step 9, right, and do your 9s before your 10, is that half measures? If you can do your step 9s without 10, 11, and 12, you don't need 10, 11, and 12. If you could recover by you applying you to you as you go straighten out your life, then you don't need 10, 11, and 12. So these people just told you that they don't really need to do this thing, but they've straightened out their life and they feel a lot better since doing it, and they feel they've recovered by applying self to self. Well, when did you do 10 and 11? They're the maintenance steps. Oh my God, the book doesn't say that. Right? The second half of how it works says what? Practice, right? So if you look at this thing, and we're going to get into it in a second, I guess we're going there right now. You look at how it works. We read it at every meeting. Most of you are thinking about what you're going to share at that meeting, but those who are listening to it, you got that in a second. We see how it works, right? So we go through this course of action. Whose course of action are they talking about? They're talking about their course of action to have this experience that we're going to look at in Bill's story, yes? Because that's what this whole thing is based on, is when his friend visited Bill with a solution to his problem, he put it in the application, the doctor witnessed this transformation that happened, and then he had a recipe that he put into practice, enabling him to have a different experience leaving the hospital. Right? We'll get into that in a sec. So the first half of how it works talks about you're pretty much hooped. Right? And then they talk about the course of action. I don't know if this was coincidence, but turn the page. It's a whole new transition that happens here. And it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of some of these steps, as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, in order, I can't go through with it. That would be around your 9s. If you're doing your 9s, how many people remember doing their 9s and having problems with their step 9s? With you thinking about you with you, you're going to be... How many people didn't even do their 4th step and they're thinking about the 9th step? I don't know about this. Well, are you going to participate in the saving of your life or not? Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to some of these principles. These principles, they turn into principles that keep us connected. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. What's the aim of our life? This is what I used to be like. I went through this whole course of action, learned the application of it, and now I practice it as I go to straighten out my life. Right? That's why it says this thought brings us to step 10 after the promise. This thought of what? That I could have the same experience that they have had by achieving all these things that they talk about. Right? They have the recipe. If you're having this problem, right, acknowledge it, pray about it, go help somebody, talk to someone. There's that recipe right on, right? And then it gets into, by this time, sanity will have returned, right? We haven't sworn, the problem's been removed. And there's, by the time I get to step 10, it doesn't say that. It says, by the time I'm halfway through, I'll experience what they're talking about, and this problem will be removed. I'll find myself in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, right? And then they go on, what creates that is 11, right? So step 11, how many people remember looking at step 11? When we retire at night, what night? Right after 7. Right after 7, right? That's why step 9 talks about doing 11 all the way through it. What does 11 say? Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. It has the daily living principles on, what does it say here? On progress. So this is how I used to handle things. Through the application of these spiritual principles, this is how I'm handling things. I'm in counsel with something else other than myself. Now, if you weren't doing 11 and 12, who would you be in counsel with? And who created all the problems? So being convinced that any life run on self-will, so where this idea came from, that you do your 9, the steps are in order for a reason. Well, so is the ladder. Right? We can't go any further than this. You got to keep going, right? It's like snake and ladder. So How many people have a driver's license or they know somebody with a driver? How many people know how to drive here? So before you were able to put that car in drive, did you just learn half of it? Or did you learn everything you need to do in order to operate that car safely? Well, no, well, safely, right? Because if not, what's the first thing? If you don't know those, you're smashing it, you're crashing it, right? You're causing mayhem, right? But the idea is, through the application of these principles, then you go into practice, yes? You have somebody that's with you, would be a sponsor. They're driving with you in the car. They explain everything you need to know about how to operate that car, where the mirrors are, right? The gas, the pedal, the brake, how to hold your hands, all that other stuff, right? And they don't even get into all the other stuff in the car. The radio, the tuning, the air conditioning, the bucket seat, the massage, or whatever. Get into none of that. Do you understand the basics? And then you go through a process. And then when you get to a certain stage, somewhere along there, you're able to take the road test. And based on everything you learned prior, would you be able to pass the road test if you did the collective experience of those that went before you who obtained the driver's license? So that's like this. We need to learn everything we need to put in the application so I can acquire a psychic change or spiritual experience. Once I do that, I enter a daily reprieve. I don't enter a daily reprieve before the psychic change. It happens after. Once I get my license, I maintain certain principles, ideas, that I get better, hopefully better driving as I go along, yes? And then life will let me know when I'm not following certain principles and ideas, yes? Here's a ticket. Here's an impound. Here's your insurance rates. No, you can't borrow my car. Right? So, right? If you see the way I drive my car sometimes, you'd wonder if I had it. Anyway, leave that alone. But you get the idea here. That's why now we're going to look at Bill's story. And they talk about here, what happens is people get certain ideas based on, where do you get that idea from? Well, I heard it. Or in another book, or this other piece of history says this. But what we're looking at in the basic text is the collective agreement on all the people's experience and the common thread to what makes it collective, yes? Mm-hmm. That's where they talk about the allergy, they talk about the condition of the mind, they talk about the course of action. The wording is quite optional. The stories in the back talk about people's different approach to their spiritual experience, but it all leads the same road. It kind of makes sense. So Bill's story, what's the purpose of Bill's story? Well, we're going to cheat here. And you hear a lot of people say, like you hear people, my sponsor was the great Chuck. The guy was like amazing. He's since passed. I got a new sponsor. He's amazing too. But he used to say, where do you get that understanding from? Or I'd go to him with something I heard in a meeting. I sound so smart, right? And he goes, doesn't say that. And he'd walk away. And I'd argue with him, my sponsor, about what the book says. The guy had like 35 years. 3 weeks again, and I'm arguing with him about his experience and the book, and he'd just smile at me, right? So I've been fortunate enough over the last 18 years so previous to that I studied the book 16. So I met my wife, and over the last 18 years we've discussed English language and how things are put together. How do you get basic understanding? How do you know what they mean by a certain thing? How do you come to that understanding that people who put this together derive? So what makes her an authority on the English language is she has her master's in English. She's part of the Golden Key Club, top 10% academic. You think she's a pretty smart cookie? Do you think that stops me from trying to argue with her about the book? We're just like that, right? Because we'll defend our position instead of looking at it. And that's the truth, right? Like, so over the last, I remember we used to do the Joe and Charlie worksheets and all that. Somebody came up to me and says, the book actually doesn't represent that idea. And I defended my position and then I went home, prayed about it, and I looked at it and I said, you know what? It's a very generic approach, but it's not an in-depth approach. So we changed the worksheets that we have here, right, that the group uses to more reflect the experience of those that went before us, so you could have the same experience, more in depth. So there is a solution, page 17. It'll tell us the purpose of Bill's story. Like, the book never leaves you hanging, and it never shanghais you. It's a basic text, right? I don't know, anybody ever been to school here? The class part, I mean? I got an A and an absentee, but I mean, it's like a math book. I remember getting a big math book, huge, sitting on the desk in grade 9, sat there, and I opened it to the middle, and I went, wow. It looked very confusing, right? So if they were to give me a test at that level of where the book is in chapter 5, here's a test in chapter 5, how well would I do at that test? I wouldn't do well at all, right? So I'd have to go back to the beginning of the book to start getting the basic understanding of mathematics, and as I went through each chapter, it would build on itself, wouldn't it? They wouldn't introduce a new idea out of nowhere. That means if you misunderstand something, you got to go back to the leading statements of that, or the leading scenarios, to come to this conclusion. And then when you got a test on chapter 1, and then you did the quiz out of 10, right? If you're really paying attention, you get 10 out of 10, because you would teach everybody the same thing, wouldn't it? And that's the same like the book. If you went through the same experience as them, you'd have the collective understanding. It would be, right? And so as we go along, so a lot of people cherry pick this thing, or they think they understand something because somebody else taught them that. You may have come to this conclusion, but can you teach somebody else how to do that? No. So it's very important. How did you derive to that answer, or that question, or that understanding? It's important, right? Because a lot of us, most of us, don't know where we derive our thinking from. Most of us go with what makes sense, or what we heard in the meeting. Would that be a fair assumption? Mm-hmm. How many people here has shared something they heard in another meeting? And as long as nobody asks you what that means or to explain it, you do pretty good, right?
As long as they're not there.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah. What does that mean? Well, I can baffle you with bullshit, because we're good at it, eh? How many people has been amazed on your ability to spin a story? Oh, we're good, eh? Huh? Anybody ever get in a jam? Get caught. And somebody tries to hold you accountable, and then you start talking, and then that person apologizes to you for even, I don't know, I hope so. And we walk away proud. Okay. So the doctor's opinion gave two kind of case studies that he witnessed. Then we see Bill's story is an expansion of somebody who's afflicted with alcoholism, and how it works. It talks about what we were like, what happened, and what we're like now. Not what it was like. Totally different story. What we were like, what happened, and what we're like now. A lot of people, if you didn't understand the what happened part, think it's, my coming to AA, or my hitting bottom, the gift of desperation, or me finding God absent of this process. But the what happened part through our collective experience is this process that I'm in turn going to help somebody else go through it. Does that kind of make sense? And what I'm like now is the second half of how it works that we just read previous to this. The ability to grow along spiritual lines. Why am I able to grow along spiritual lines? Because I have the guidelines. Where did I get the guidelines from? That's what they laid out. They showed me what they did. And by doing what they did, it allows me to sustain life where I wasn't able to do that. So the purpose of Bill's story here, they talk about page 17. Then we're going to go back. You hear a lot of people, go find yourself. That's not the purpose of Bill's story. If you identify with some stuff, awesome. But it's not for you to look for you. That's the self-centered approach. We already explained that. If I said, hey, you know what? We're all going to go to the cinema on Saturday. I'm starring in a movie, a small part. I'm an extra in this 3-hour movie. They go, where are you? And I'm not too sure, but I'm in there. And then we all just started looking. Where's Tony in this? Would you catch the idea of the movie? So that's the premise here. So the purpose of Bill's story is to sit back and see what alcoholism looks like in somebody's life, what happened to make a change in his story, and what his story was like after this change. What makes you say that? Well, page 17. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. So would you be looking for that in his story? The hopeless feature of his condition and his inability to battle it? Would you say yes? It just made that clear here, didn't it? How many people are still here? Oh, good. Nope, not listening anymore. Too much overload. Okay, so, wow, nearly all have, what's that big word?
Recovered.
They have solved the drink problem. If they have recovered and solved the drink problem, are they still dealing with alcoholism and the drink problem? Pardon? No. Right? If you brought your car to a mechanic and your red light was showing after you put the black tape on it and it was still causing problems, that's how we treat recovery. Oh, there's a light there, indicating light, there's a problem. Well, just put some black tape on it. Right? Let's ignore it. And then we're on the side of the road and we get mad at the car. It's been trying to tell us, hey, there's something wrong here. Ignore. Anybody? Some of you are identifying, right? And you brought it to a mechanic, and the mechanic would diagnose it based on the funny sounds you were making. Anybody ever talk to a mechanic? It goes, the mechanic diagnoses what the sounds you're making and the symptoms that you're presenting. The mechanic will go, oh, look, it's this problem. If it's this problem, then this is the solution, and this is the course of action we're going to take. If they stopped anywhere along that course of action, would you leave with a worse problem or have the same problem that you went in there with? It'd be worse because the car would be half done. Right? Bolts missing. And that's how most of us go through recovery. A couple of them. Bolts missing. So if they gave you they say, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the course of action we need to take, has anything changed? What completes that course of action is when he hands you back the keys. And so we see that step 12 is a confirmation of step 2, right? Is the idea that there's a solution here, right? Through a course of action. So the mechanic will say, here's the solution to this problem. And then you'd agree whether the car is worth saving or not, whether you want to go through this course of action on a payment plan, right? That's what really sobriety ends up being, is a payment plan, right? First book costs you everything you got. Second book, $16. Okay, so what happens is you get in your car, and when you drove away and the light came back on, how many people would be like beside themselves? But you got in your car, you based on everything you were told, that problem should be fixed, yes? And they said, now watch out for certain things, this, and this, and then it won't return again. Does that kind of make sense? How many people like that approach better? That we'll go through a course of action, we'll get all the principles we need to have a successful life, a life beyond anything we could ever imagine, because in the promises, anybody ever hear the promises read? You'll be amazed. Yeah, I'm sober. You want what I got. You want to inform your face? Like, how many people want to be amazed about their story? Or, oh, yes, another day I got up this morning with untreated alcoholism. I reminded myself it's in the parking lot doing push-ups. I'm being diligent. Oh, my God. Nothing appealing about that. I'm 35 years sober, right? I'm going to be 36 in April. I'm more excited about my sobriety now than I was when I first was trying to understand what the hell was going on. Like, I got a phenomenal life. Why? Because of the recipe that I incorporate in my life. I've had the experience, right? It's like one of those things. Anybody remember watching people drink? And you go, and then you have a drink? You don't need to explain, do you? Once you experience it, it's kind of like, oh, I'll take it from here. Any I'll take it from here, people? Once you have the experience, then it's different, and that seemed like sobriety. So, let's go back to Bill's story. So we just finished the doctor's opinion. He's going to give us a case study, what they're talking about here. And I'm going to hit some highlights, because whose job is it to go through this? Your job, right? My job is not to hold your hand and take you through this. Some people do that. That's not my kind of thing. I got far too much things to be doing in my life than to, help you fit your life jacket every day. Okay, so can you participate? Oh no, where's my son there? Oh, sorry. Anyways, okay, so I have these moments. I'd like to apologize for anybody I've offended, and I'll get to the rest of you shortly. Okay, so they talk about here, in Bill's story, he goes through a bit of his history, and then he talks about where he discovered liquor, right? And then as they go through here on page 2, he talked about nearly failing a law course, right? So we see the progression happening. He wants to achieve something, but something else making his decisions for him, yes? Next page, he talks about for the next few years, fortune and money, right? My drinking assumed more serious proportions. Okay, right? Then the next page, he talks about hell breaking loose, right? Abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose, right? And then we're jumping from high finances, right? Jumping from high buildings, killing, like the market went to shit, right? So I could relate to this part. Something tragic happened in my life, or is going to happen in my life. Most people would deal with that, right? What did Bill do? He went back to the bar. How many people has had a problem, went back to the bar? That problem will go away, honestly. It will, unless it's a warrant. Right? A relationship, you hear people say, I lost everything. No, everybody lost you. You got lost. They're still living their lives. They're all waiting for you to come back. They're rooting and hoping and praying and want so much different for you, right? But then they start getting scathed and worried because despite all your efforts, despite all your problems, you can't create a different story. So now they're starting to get skeptical. They're giving you that look when you're trying to explain you mean it this time. And in their heart, they want to believe it, but they become calloused. You can't stay here anymore. You got to leave. You got to phone somebody. Anybody? Yeah. Fun stuff, eh? Next page, page 5. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by a mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. They're living with the mother-in-law father, right? So he's not adding to the house at all, is he? Right? He's okay, right? So his family probably really, right? Okay. Father-in-law became ill. I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a high point, right? This is pretty wild here, right? So I had somewhat formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious. Thank you. Bender, just seeing if you're paying attention. That chance vanished. I don't know how many times where I had good opportunity, things happened, then I took a drink and it vanished or things happened. Okay, I can identify with that. But looking at Bill's story, we see the progressions happening. And this is where he kind of has it's kind of called the moment of clarity. We have all had it along our story. Our life has tried to get our attention. People have tried to get our attention. But you've had a moment where you've seen you as everybody else sees you. A moment. And either you seek help in that moment or you have another drink and that moment dissipates. Anybody? So they talk about here, that thing, I woke up, this had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. So, that's important because a lot of people give you the understanding that we struggle with the obsession. Well, what's the obsession that the book talks about that they all agreed on in formulating of the separation between the human condition and alcoholism? The obsession that they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is twofold. One is being your own solution on page 23. The other one is in regards to controlling and enjoying your drinking. If you still have the idea that you could control and enjoy your drinking, do you even think you have a problem? No. You're still obsessed with the idea. So is Bill obsessed with the idea that he could control and enjoy his drinking here? Well, let's read it again. Ready? Everybody got their book open? Okay, page 5. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. Is he obsessed with the idea of controlling and enjoying his drinking?
No.
Okay, ready? Read it again.
I saw I
I saw, that's right. So he's not obsessed with the idea of controlling and enjoying his drinking, is he? No, he knows. I saw I could not take so much. I'm allergic to pistachios. I know I can't eat pistachios in any form whatsoever. This had to be stopped. I ended up in the hospital. I can't do it. I can't do it. Is Bill there? Or is he like, there's got to be a way I could eat these things. I woke up. This had to be stopped. Right? So he's going to apply himself to self, which is the first obsession. Yes? First obsession of trying to fix himself with self. Why? Because he doesn't understand the illness yet. It would make sense that he would be able to stop based on his conviction, yes, and his experience. We hear that all the time in AA. I should be able to stop based on my conviction. If you really meant it, and the book talks about those people. If you had, right, heavy drinkers, people, right, given good reason. We've all more than that. He has good reason, okay? Here we go. I love this part. I've written a lot of sweet promises. My wife happily observed this time I meant business, and so I did. Got my 3-month chip. Things are happening. Thinking about the next conference I'm going to be the keynote speaker at in 3 months. What your cake's going to sound like. Huh? Put that on a resume of the jobs I should be getting now. I'm becoming a vision for you. Okay, shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. Wow. There had been no fight. Right? That was pretty quick. There had been no fight. So is he contemplating? Is he thinking about it? No fight. And he's going to explain this thing that happened in his mind, right? Because he meant business. Everybody sees he means business. There's a change happening, but he's applying his human condition is changing, but he's still afflicted with the illness that we'll get into studying a little more later of this condition in the mind that you can't see, feel, and touch. He can't see, feel, and touch this thing that we like to think we work on or we treat alcoholism, my alcoholism that I talk to on a daily basis with. No, if it's still present, you're in trouble. It's like having an intruder in your house that you don't know where it is. Anyways, okay. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone pushed a drink my way, and I have taken it. Was I crazy? I begin to wonder. So he's sitting there. We're sitting there in a situation I've never drinking. Somebody pushed a drink his way. He took it. No fight, no resolve, no nothing. No defense. And this is on page 5. Right? So let's see what he does with that information. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Sounds like a lot of people's experience in sobriety. Here's your 24-hour chip. Here's your 3-month chip. Here's your 6-month chip. Here's your 24-hour chip. Here's your 9-month chip. Here's your 24-hour chip. Here's your 16-month chip. Here's your 24-hour chip. Here's your 5-year chip. Here's your 24-hour chip. Right? Because a lot of people, let's be honest, how many people experienced a bit of sobriety before and then relapsed? How many people thought, look what I did before? I got 3 months before. Yes, look what you got before. Right? Or you think, especially people who have had a bit of sobriety based on self and relapse because the illness resurfaces again, right? And they come back, they think they could do what they did to get them the first 6 months or the first 5 years. They think they can do it again because they don't understand the illness component, right? But their illness has progressed because they haven't experienced a lull or a reprieve, right? Just because I'm sober doesn't mean it's not progressing. Like people who are allergic, like I'm allergic, like I said, to pistachios, as time goes on, I become more allergic to it. Right? My mom, certain things she has to stay away altogether. It's like people with peanut allergy can't even have the dust around them anymore because it becomes more pronounced as time goes on. So physically, my illness keeps on progressing. Later on, they get into a man of 30. He was able to stop based on his experience, but the illness is still progressing. The physical aspect, right? Without getting into all of it. And then out came the carpet slippers. He took the drink again. In a short period of time, he was dead. I think 4 years. And he tried all the means of stopping, but this thing was so progressed, right? So I would be dead in a short period of time. There's no doubt in my mind. Like at 27, when I finally got sober, I was vomiting green bile. My liver was popped out here. Like I was in bad shape. Like my cheese and cracker weren't even in the same area code. Like I was like unemployable. I was in bad shape. So now, if the insanity ever returned, if alcoholism ever returned again, and I found myself without defense against that first drink, I'd be dead in a short period of time. I have no doubt about that. Like I remember at 16 years sober, I went for a physical. The guy comes over and says, based on your chart, you should quit drinking. I said, I haven't drank in 16 years. He says it's a good thing because that spotting on the liver, that's where the liver starts to digress. It starts to harden and you get spotting on it. So that's what my brother died of 32 years old, right? 32. I was 4 years sober when he died. Full-blown cirrhosis of the liver. His blood was black. So I stayed a week with him in the hospital. That's another story. Okay, so, and they talked about here the mind and body, and so they go on here and they talked about his brain and then started getting in the pills, right? Because a lot of us, as we start progressing, we need the helpers in the morning to get us going. And the helpers seem to help us, whatever. We got a lot more diversity in those things now. And you hear people say, I'm an alcoholic and whatever you got. Right? Okay. On the next page here, it talks about going to treatment. Right? So he knows his situation is serious enough on page 7 where he's going to treatment, yes? Mm-hmm. And he talks about the doctor explains his condition. Yeah, when you went through it, yeah? So here's how he hears that information. Ready? Like we just explained here, when you explain step 1, it's a hopeless condition of the mind and body, seemingly hopeless condition of the mind and body. Left to your own defense, you'll continue to drink unless you experience an entire psychic change or spiritual experience. Yes? Yeah. Probably going to die an alcoholic death. Right? For the amount of people that come here and the amount of people get it, right? I've worked with thousands of people in the last 35 years. Easy. The numbers are huge, the amount of people I've worked with compared to the amount of people that actually participate in getting it. It's pretty mind-boggling. So that's why I always focus on those that are here and doing it, right? Because legions. Okay. So he talks about, it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. This guy doesn't want to drink. He's not battling with the obsession. He wants to stop, but he keeps on drinking again. Right? Mm-hmm. All right, understanding myself now. How many people that, I understand step 1. As long as I don't take the first one, I'll be okay. You're not listening. You're not listening. Right? Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. It says, what do they ask you to remember? And people go, cunning, baffling. Well, how would you be able to watch for cunning and baffling? If it's cunning and baffling, who would be the only one that don't know what's happening? You. I'm watching. What are you watching? Cunning and baffling. It's around here somewhere. I'm just keeping an eye on it. Sleight of hand like you never see it coming. It's remember. Remember, you can't remember. Remember? Oh, what happened? I forgot. Didn't you remind yourself you're an alcoholic this morning? Yeah, I forgot by lunch. Anyways, you'll find that funny later. Okay, so I fared forth in high hope. And you hear people say, we did this at a group once, there was about 30 people here. We asked at the beginning of the thing, how many people feel they're of the hopeless variety? Nobody's hand went up. By the end of the study, those that were left, right? Because once the work starts, it's like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm over at the 12 and 12 if you're looking for me. I want to talk about Bill's experience instead of having my own. By the end of the education of this, they were able to say, yes, I'm of this type, and I see the necessity of doing this. Because what persuades us is relapse. Alcohol beats us into a state of reasonableness. Right? It's kind of, we sign our own death warrant, which is really interesting anyways, moving on. So, but surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. And then you hear a lot of people and discuss, a lot of different recovery groups online, And it's amazing how many people really like the self-knowledge part. Because if you could depend on you, then it gives you a sense of comfort, doesn't it? Right? Well, when it happens, I'll bring it to a meeting. I'll phone my sponsor. I'll do something to combat this thing when I'll just watch out for it. Then you don't understand it. And how you know you don't understand it? As soon as you say the obsession is gone, I'm all right. You just told me you don't understand alcoholism or it doesn't apply to you. Because he wasn't battling with the idea of drinking, was he? It just kept on happening in spite of his efforts not to. So here, that's a dilemma. Why am I keep on doing something that I don't want to do? It's an act against my own. Why is this happening all the time? So he went back to the hospital. And then they talk about all the things you hear within our fellowship as a precursor to getting sober. Right? You hear the gift of desperation, acceptance. You hear all this nice fluff stuff that refers to people who are not like us and whose experiences are not like ours. Because anybody who's had this experience and gone through this process wouldn't tell that to a new person. Because they realize we're on a life and death errand, right? We realize unless this person experienced what I experienced, they're probably going to die an alcoholic death. And that's why, you ever wonder why we're so happy to see you every meeting we go to? But you just seen me yesterday. Yes. Anything could have happened between yesterday and today. Right? That's why we greet each other, why we shake hands. It's so good to see you. Because we're dealing with something that takes, I'm going to be really nice, 80% of us out who are afflicted with this illness. Dead. We're a small percentage of the people who have the opportunity to have a different experience. A small percent. And within that percentage of people within our fellowship, right, not everybody needs this experience to stay here. Right? Like I know most of your stories is like you go over to do something, next thing you're drinking is like, how the hell did this happen? Well, that's what we're getting into. So here. Ready? Page 8. So he's hearing this thing go on, and he talks about no words could tell the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand surrounded me in all directions. I had met my match. I'd been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Did he do a good step one there? Yeah. 100%. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of the first drink. He knows his condition now. Insidious insanity of the first drink. This guy doesn't want to drink, and it's back again. He finds himself doing something that he doesn't want to do, and he's without defense of doing it. What's keeping him sober is fear. Right? That's the second time in treatment. So then in here, this is my thing based on my experience, is somewhere along the line, I cried out I did the third step prayer, April 8, 1989. And I knew I was going to die an alcoholic death. I did that at the old hotel, last call, and I knew I was just going to die. Nothing would work for me. I remember doing the third step prayer, and something happened. I didn't know it then, but looking back, something profound happened that they came with my last beer, and I couldn't even drink it. It smelled like skunk beer. I put it aside, and I went home, and I tried to sell the 12 I had behind my headboard and all the little other goodies I had to go with that. And I just gave it all away. The next day I ended up in a meeting, and then the chain of events started to unfold. Right? God's people showed up, right? And that's why when we do 12-step work, you get that inkling and say, go here or do this or do that. We don't go, why? You'll be notified when you get there. You hear people, I don't believe. It's okay. You'll be contacted shortly. Just keep coming, right? Just keep going through this. So He talks about his friends showing up, Ebby, getting on a train or going to go see him with this experience. And then as he went through this, as he sat there on page 11, but my friend sat before me and made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had been, in effect, risen from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. That's pretty wild. So he sees this thing happening in his facility as he's drinking. right? So then, had this power originated in him? Obviously not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and that was none at all. So and then he talks about his idea, his step 2 took place of the idea that maybe there was something available for him. In this conversation, he's seen that maybe there was something different, right? What made him think that was his conversation with his buddy. So he talked about here, that floored me. It began to look like religious people were right all along. Here was something at work in the human heart that had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then and there. Revised right then. I added there, so it sounded more theatrical. So I commit to it. So then he talks about on the next page, based on a 2-hour or more conversation. Remember, this is summarized for a presentation on what's available, how the transition happened. And a lot of people say, add this, but the gist of it is, he's been to treatment twice, nothing is taking place. He's having this conversation with somebody who's had an experience. He sees it's possible that his ideas of miracles are revised right then and then. He's perplexed by the experience his friend's having compared to the one he's having, yes? So then he talked about, and he's struggling with his own ideas about God. So if Bill was to go with his own ideas right then and there, he would never have completed this thing. His friend presented an idea and an experience. Then he talks about here, despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vast vestiges of old prejudice. The word God still aroused certain antipathy. Antipathy? And then it goes in I could call it this, that, this. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception? Was that before he talked to him or after? When did he say choose your own conception? Before he presented his experience or after? After. And that's, so here, when we present you our understanding, you could go with your own conception, but you can't go with your own understanding what the solution is. You need to understand what we are offering as the solution, and you could go with your own conception. So when they presented this to me, I went with frequency. I was okay with frequency. Like I kind of like the transmitter, the radio, and kind of connected, that I had the receiver, and there was I like that idea. And the steps were about lining into this thing where I tap into this unit. It made sense to me, and I went through with that idea. Okay, show me. Right? So it talked about her. That statement hit me hard. So it was only a squiggly writing. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point upon a foundation of complete willingness. I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? So he did steps 1, 2, and 3. Yes? Yes. What confirmed his decision was on the next page. Right? He went to the hospital, separated from alcohol. There I humbled myself to God. His friend took him through a course of action. Yes? Did his friend take him through the first 9 steps and then say, okay, when you're done now, I'll give you the rest of the information? No, right? He was passing on his experience. What was his experience was to tap into this power, yes? Our experience, the idea in step 3, presented in 2, is to tap into this thing. So the idea in step 3 is I could have a relationship with this power. Lack of power is my dilemma, yes? Where and how was I to find this one? That's what this book is about. It talked about I was to test my new thinking with the new God consciousness within. What? He's doing step 11? He hasn't did 8, 9, and 10 yet. That's the whole purpose. He has this connection. My friend promised when these things were done. Has he left the hospital yet? No. He's still in the hospital. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. I'd have the elements of a way living that answered all my problems. Belief in a power, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the order of things were essential. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light. As he's lying in the hospital, the thought came to him that other people might benefit from this thing. What does he have now? He has the same recipe his friend gave him, yes? Mm-hmm. He's connected, yes? Has he made any amends yet? No. Has he started working with anybody yet? No. He's still in the hospital, but he has the connection. He has the lifeline and the principles that keep him connected. And then when you read what he was like afterwards, on the next page, he talks about here about abandoning his life to this work, right? Him and his wife. Well, he can't do that. He hasn't done all his nines yet. It goes in sync. The steps aren't compartmentalized. Like when I drive my car, I don't just practice my brakes today. I put everything in effect. All the mirror, everything's in effect, right? And I adjust accordingly as I go along, yes? And then like today, a big crash on the bridge, so I took a different route to get here. Simple. And he talked about what he had here is now a recipe. And we'll finish with this. It says, my wife and I abandoned ourselves with the enthusiasm of the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found very little work. I was not too well at the time, and I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. The first year in that, right? This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, that work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a new man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It's a design for living that works in what? So he has the design. He puts it in application. If you look at the book, we read through 8 and 9, we prepare, we read 10, we go into application that night when we retire at night, and then we start looking for people to work with as we clean up the past. It's a full package deal. As the result of this course of action, I get to recover. When does that happen? I don't know exactly. But somewhere along the line, there'll be a transformation in attitude, outlook, right? And something will happen, and everybody around me will start noticing it, right? If it was by the time I got to step 10, if I recovered by the time I read step 10, guess how many step 9s I'd do? Guess how many people I'd work with? It's a full package deal, right? And anybody tells you different, you tell them to come see me. So we have the 7th edition. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. And that pays for the books, the literature, and the rental and all that other stuff. And how we close this meeting was a bit of outside, inside help. What do we need for a great life? God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. Live long and prosperous, and may the force be with you.